One of the things that holds home buyers back from making a decision to stop renting and purchase a home is their anxiety about talking to a lender. So I'm sitting down today with one of our great Las Vegas lenders, Ryan Olson at All Western Mortgage, and we're going to walk you through what that process looks like and shake out all the jitters of talking to a lender, whether it's in person or on the phone. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to expect. So Ryan, when I have a new customer that's ready to look at the home buying process and is a little nervous and anxietable about talking to a lender, let's start with the basics. How do I best connect them with you? Is it by email, send them to your website, a telephone call? What's the lender's preferable means of making that first contact and building rapport with the customer?
Most lenders will be able to kind of meet the client wherever they are. So if a client's maybe real busy and they don't have a lot of free time, maybe starting the conversation via text might be best. Some clients, maybe they just want to ask a lot of upfront questions like right away, and they want to get those answers, and maybe a phone call would be the best. I think the best thing to do is if anyone wants to buy a home and they've already determined which lender they want to start the conversation with, they should just get on the phone with the lender. I like to just get on the phone with the client in the very beginning stages, just to have usually just a 5-minute phone call to just determine what their goals are. Like, are they going to be using the home to live in as a primary residence? Are they going to be buying a rental property? Stuff like that. Do they have down payment? All that. From there, we could get into a basic application, which we'll get into here, or they could also fill out an online application, because ultimately what a lender needs to do is take a full application from a home buyer that looks at all their basic details on mainly income, assets, and credit. Those are the three main areas. And so that can be done over the phone. Usually it takes about 10 minutes. Or nowadays, it's more common actually that a lender will just send a link to an online application. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the software that lenders use are very user-friendly. So like most people don't have a hard time filling it out. And then they can continue the conversation, once they provide all that info to the lender.
Yeah, I'm a pick up the phone kind of girl as well. And some people do work better by text because they are busy. So I'm totally aligned with that. A lot of people I find do resist that telephone call. Like what is the story you think that they make up in their head? Like what's going to happen on that call? Why they are resistant or avoiding like the reality of, making that first step?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons. So one reason might simply be that they're worried that like the lender is not going to be honest with them. Just to be frank, some of us are seeing like maybe a used car salesman, or they're thinking like we're kind of like some kind of Wolf of Wall Street type of guy that's just trying to get the next sale. So that and to no fault of anyone that feels that way, but that honestly is sometimes
like they're going to be sold something.
One reason. Another reason, honestly, I hear from a lot of people is like, well, I don't want to talk to a lender yet because I don't know if I'm going to qualify.
Right.
Which it just, to be frank, it seems kind of silly to me doing this 13 years, because the only way you can determine what you qualify for, or if you qualify, or what you need to fix, is by talking to a lender. So, and then I think we've experienced someone that was difficult to get an application from, and I think it was. I think sometimes they even start to wonder, like, well, why do you want me to use this guy so bad?
Right.
And of course, you're always clear, like, you can use any lender you want.
Yeah.
But I think it's just. Plus, they're giving all their personal info. Like,
right.
If you do go through the full application, they're going to ask you your social security number, date of birth, all that personal info.
But it's all on the portal and privacy protected.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Like as a licensed loan officer and someone who is honest, I'm very, very careful with that information. It's just honestly like routine for me. I'm never going to give out that info. I'm always going to have it protected through our software and all that. But that's another thing that people worry about. And another thing is people may have had a really bad experience in the past already talking to a lender, and then they might not want to go through that same horrible experience again.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to loop back to that realtors like myself do have preferred people we work with, and we're not getting any type of kickback or anything like that. At least I can only speak for myself. I choose the people I work with, whether it's a lender, a title partner, a painter, a cleaning person, a landscaper, because they've delivered proven, honest, reliable service and results. So that was a really good point that people are pointing you to the right people. If you're working with a good agent you trust, they're pointing you to great vendors that they trust, and there's no reason to be anxietable about jumping on that call. Thanks for that answer.
Sure. One other thing I would throw into that whole mix is, like, ultimately the client, the home buyer who's interested in talking to the lender, they're in the driver's seat. So if they trust you, let's say their real estate agent referred them a lender and they put the trust in the real estate agent and ultimately contact the lender. It's not like one and done type of thing. If you talk to the lender and you don't like what they said or you don't get the right feel for them or anything, you don't ever have to talk to them again. You don't have to give them any info. Even if you did do an application with them, that doesn't mean you have to go with them. So it's just, it's an initial conversation. A lot of people don't understand that part, and that's probably what adds a lot of the intimidation.
I agree with that. And I will also add to that I much prefer those one-on-one personal relationships over the online. I'm not going to name any brands or names, but anybody can go online and be like, what are you approved for? Or find out in 45 seconds. Like, that is so unreliable. It does not account for so many things like taxes and HOAs and insurance, and they aren't pulling your credit.
Right.
And you really don't know what loan program you're designated for. You may have a better program for them. They may not qualify for that program at all. But until you have that direct communication, until the customer has that direct communication with a knowledgeable lender locally in their area that knows all the programs, incentives, down payment assistance, whatever it is they're trying to do, like, that's always the best bet for them versus online.
Yeah, and my approach typically is like a hybrid approach, and probably a lot of other good lenders do this too, where it's like you said, if you do strictly online, if you go online, you're going to miss out of a lot of important minute detail or little things that may seem minor but are very important to your scenario. And sometimes it can be the opposite way, whereas a lender might take an application from you. You only talk to them on the phone. They give you a pre-approval letter, but they didn't really give you much info. So I think, the way I do it is like a hybrid approach. I like to have a conversation with them over the phone, build a little bit of rapport, find out their goals, make sure I'm understanding those goals. And then if they want, they can fill out the online application from there. I actually love that because it's not going to miss any little detail. It's going to get everything that they need, but it's still pretty quick to do. But from there, I wouldn't just give them a pre-approval letter. A good lender from there is going to give them a very detailed breakdown of all of their options and why they qualify for a certain program, why the minimum down is how much, what they can expect their payment to be, all that important stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. That consultation is what I would refer to it as, is so much different than an online approval, because some people are very fortunate in that they have options of they can put a good amount of money down, 20% or whatever, but they don't always want to or need to. And it's just about getting the right strategy together, which you help them with. I'm Italian. I can't talk without my hands.
Oh, I talk with my hands all the time, too. Yeah.
I feel like I'm cuffed. Anyway, that's a great point of like just having that one-on-one consultation to really work through which program makes the most sense for them and what their goals are. Maybe they're only going to be in this job assignment for 2 or 3 years. So they want a different program than someone who's making it a 20 or 30 year forever home, and have different long-term financial goals. So that's awesome. Okay, so we've connected the client with the lender in the preferred way that they like to communicate and you like to communicate. What happens next?
Okay, so during the initial phone call, I will just ask about usually a few basic things. Let's say before we're going to even consider taking an application from a client. Because again, I'll say it this way. So, because like we discussed earlier, a lot of clients are scared about giving their info right off the bat. You don't have to do that. But the initial conversation, usually, I'll say, hey, Nichole asked me to reach out to you to help you to determine your home loan options. I'm happy to look into your particular scenario. If you want, I can ask you some really basic questions, and that'll give us a really good head start on what programs might be best for you. And then people will say, oh, that sounds good. So then I'll say, okay, great. The home that you'd like to purchase, is this something, the home that you prefer to live in, like as your primary residence, or is it going to be more of a second home or a rental property? Let's say in this case, it's a primary residence, right? So I'll say, okay, great. A few things that we have to look at. Are you currently employed? Maybe they say, yes. Okay, how long have you been with your employer? Well, been there a year. Okay, well, we have to verify a 2-year job history if we're using that type of income for you to qualify, W-2 employer, whatever, which we'll get into further in a moment. So did you work anywhere prior to that, your current employer? Oh, yes, I worked at my previous employer for 2 years. Okay, if you had to guess, how long would you say the gap was between when you left your old employer and you started at your new one? Oh, it was like 2 months. Okay, I think we'll be good there. That covers a 2-year job history that we have to look at.
Right.
Then I might ask, how do you get paid? Is it hourly, salary? Oh, I get paid hourly. How much do you make per hour? $30 an hour. Okay. Do you typically work 40 hours a week? Oh, okay, great. Do you ever work less than that? Okay. So that I'm kind of building this in my head to where I can figure out how I'm going to have to calculate it, because every scenario on, how many hours, if your hours vary and all that depend on,
do you work overtime?
Yeah, that
how
type of
often?
thing.
Yeah.
So those are just some general questions I'll ask. We need much more info on the application, but I'll ask that, and then I'll say, okay, great. I won't hold you to this, but do you have any funds available for a down payment? Mm-hmm. And they, may say yes or no. And then sometimes I'll add, if they say, oh, I definitely want to put 20% down. Well, then, those, we would get into that conversation. But maybe they say, well, I don't really have any funds down. I'll start giving details on options that we have maybe for down payment assistance,
right.
Where they can help cover your down payment. They can help cover your down payment on a purchase of a primary residence. So kind of give them some info on that.
That's great.
And then usually the other thing I'll get into on that initial phone call is I'll say, do you have an idea roughly of what your credit score looks like? It doesn't have to be exact. A lot of people will know what that is.
Sure.
And if they know it's like real low, then I'll bring up options, and we have credit repair that we can start looking into once we dig deep into your file. Mm-hmm. Or if they have excellent credit, I'll usually give them a pat on the back for having excellent credit.
For
that
sure.
type of thing. So from there, then I'll usually say, okay, great. So if everything checks out there, because really the main thing is if you don't have any steady income, like you could have other sources of income besides employment, but if you don't have one of the other options of steady income or employment or whatever, or if you don't have a plan for down payment, whether it be your own funds or down payment assistance, or if you need credit help, we can kind of start determining that right off the bat, and then we know what we need to work on. But if all those three check out based on the initial conversation, I'll say, okay, great. So from here, the best way for me to determine your exact options is for me to take a basic application from you. Now, there's no obligation for you to move forward once I complete that application with you, but it's going to put everything in front of me that I need to see to determine exactly what you qualify for, how much, what loan programs you qualify for, all that. And then from there, I'll usually send you a video explanation where I break all that down. We can have a follow-up conversation, and from there, if you decide that you'd like to pursue your home search and you'd like to use me as your lender, I'd be happy to help. And if not, that's of course okay too.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing you say is you're almost doing like a pre-underwriting, pre-qualification to make sure there's no, big hiccups that you're going to have to overcome before you send that loan application. So you're not just taking the call and being like, hey, here's an online loan application. Mm-hmm. Call me when you're done. Yeah.
And because even when I get that full application from them, there's still certain little details that we'll discuss that I'll make note of. So when I'm doing the pre-approval, I can, see how that fits into their scenario.
For sure. Everyone is unique. Every scenario for sure.
Yeah. And that's not to say if someone's like, oh, I got a 500 credit score, I'll say, okay, bye.
Yeah. No.
But then I'll notate that, figure out, maybe see if what they know what's wrong with their credit. And then when we do take that application, some cases it's even more necessary to take an application for those people who want to buy but need help, so that we could start digging into that. And I know what I need to start working on first.
Yeah. And you've been excellent with that. I have that happen all the time where I think we just had one where they had a medical emergency. There was a chronic illness and it took somebody out of work and we're able to work with them now because their long-term plan is to definitely stop renting, because renting is just paying someone else's mortgage, and get them on the right path. Bad credit is nothing. I don't even want to say call it bad, but like a low credit score is nothing to be ashamed of. Life happens fast, and many times it's not anything that we can't figure out. It just takes a little bit of time and guidance from a great professional.
Yeah, and that's why if you're scared to apply for a home loan, like these are the things that are going to help alleviate your fears. Like you might talk to a lender who takes out, you might talk to a lender that verifies some very basic info and then gives you a pre-approved letter and then they got it all wrong.
Yeah.
But, a good lender, which there's plenty of them out there, they'll make sure that they're accounting for every one of these little details and then seeing how you appropriately fit into the loan guidelines.
Yeah, that's great information. Very helpful. Hopefully that helps with people in overcoming that initial call anxiety. Okay, so you've won over their trust enough to get them to fill out the loan application. They're feeling comfortable with you, and then you get the loan application results back. What happens next? You've sent the video. What happens next?
Yeah, so just a reminder, we can take the application over the phone. So sometimes I'll be like, cool, I already have some of the info I need. If you have another 10 minutes and you prefer for me to take the rest of the info for an application over the phone, I can do that now.
Okay.
And then sometimes people will be like, well, I want to do it with my husband and he doesn't get off to work till 7. So then I'll say, okay, great. I'll send you the online application. It's very user-friendly. If you have any questions when you're filling it out, let me know. And then once you fill all that out, it'll ask you to upload some basic items. And then I'll have everything I need to determine your pre-approval. Now, sometimes either I take the application over the phone or I have them fill out the online app. They might not have. So when I take it over the phone, I'll follow up with, I'll say, okay, I'm going to follow up with the short list of items. For example, it might be like your most recent pay stubs, W-2s, and bank statements. Sometimes they don't have those, so we work through that. Or sometimes when they fill out the application, they filled it out, but they didn't upload those items. You never want a lender to pre-approve you without checking those things because it's just a random guess, and it means absolutely nothing. So sometimes we got to work out, like, they'll say, I don't have pay stubs. And then I'll say, well, usually if you don't get paper pay stubs, your employer still has to have some kind of pay stub system that you can get either online or from your payroll department. So we work those things out. Now, assuming I have all that info in front of me, I have everything I need to determine your pre-approval. One thing to understand is all lenders basically have the same loan programs and guidelines they have to follow. It's just a matter of navigating those correctly. So I'll calculate the income directly according to the loan guidelines, which if you know what you're doing, you can do that pretty quickly, assuming you have all the info in front of you. Same thing with your assets. So like there are certain assets we can count more of. Like if you have a 401k, we have to count a little bit less than the balance, and so on and so forth. So I'll calculate the asset numbers according to the loan guidelines. And then I'll have everything plugged in correctly. Now, one thing that's very important for a lender to do for you is I always run the file through the automated underwriting system. It's like a computer program that basically determines whether you qualify. And if I don't get all that calculation correctly and I run it through, I could get an approved answer, but then it turns out when your loan gets underwritten way later on by like the final deciders, they say, oh, Ryan, you calculated this income wrong. It actually should be less and this person doesn't qualify.
So you have to actually know math.
Yeah, you have to know math and you have to make sure the file's input exactly how it's supposed to be. And run that file through that system. That's such an important step that a lot of lenders don't do. But once I've done all that, then like we can really, really count on what loan programs you qualify for, how much, what your payment's going to be, all that. So once I have all that done behind the scenes, then I will typically, I usually will send a video explanation. So where I have a spreadsheet on my screen and me in the corner, and I'll just create the video and I'll say, hey, John, thanks for applying. I've reviewed your whole scenario, and I'm going to spend about 5 to 10 minutes going over your specific scenario. And I'll break all down, like the program that you would be using, or if you have multiple options, what they would be, and why those programs would be better, than any other ones or necessary. I'll break down what your total payment would be, which includes principal, interest, tax, and insurance. Those are the components of your mortgage payment. Break down a very close estimate, because some of the times we don't know what the taxes and insurance are. I'll break all that payment down for you. I'll go over what your minimum down payment would be on the screen, so I'm kind of going line by line. And then I'll give you an estimate of like what your total closing cost would be. So when you buy a home, you have to put a certain amount down. If you're buying as a primary residence, especially if like you're a first-time home buyer, you can put as little as 3% down. Sometimes you might want to put more. We would get into all that. And that's something that I would notate on your on the initial call, and that way I can go over it on that video. So I'd break all that down, and so you have an idea of like what you qualify for, how much house you can afford to buy, what you're going to come out of pocket with, as far as down payment and any closing costs, which are additional fees that you pay, in addition to your down payment, and then what your monthly payment would be. So if I just gave all that info to you over the phone, sometimes people are like, I don't do computers, I don't do video, just tell me, or send me an email and I'll type it up in an email. But if I just give that info to you over the phone, it's kind of like information overload. So much info I just threw at you, right? Yeah. So if I do the video, and this is going to be relevant to me, a lot of people who might be watching would never even talk to me, but
Right. Why would you say that?
well, maybe they have a cousin that's a lender or whatever, but
Do they do math?
But yeah, but if I send that to you in video, you can see it on the screen and you can watch it multiple times over,
Right.
and then I always want to have a follow-up conversation with you about those numbers, you know, that I went over. And when we do all that, like that can all be done in a day.
For sure.
If I take the application from you, that can take 10 minutes. Maybe I get those pay stubs and W-2s from you. Maybe that took 15 minutes, 20 minutes for you to pull online. And then I run all those numbers, usually sometimes same day, or try to get that back to you the next day. You're going to have like on your home loan options, what you qualify for, you're going to have every detail laid out for you on you know what that looks like. And for those of you who are anxious, it's going to like alleviate so much of that anxiety, and you can confidently. And then maybe you even look at those numbers and like, I don't want to pay that for a house. Like I'm going to save more, or you know, I'm going to work on improving my credit. Maybe I get a better interest rate. Those are things.
Or downsize their expectations of a property. I've had that happen where we switch from single family to look at some really great condo or townhomes.
Right.
To just get in for 2 years, build that equity, and then move on to the next one.
Yeah, because maybe you've been searching homes online for 3 months and you've fallen in love with all these homes, and then you get pre-approved and you're like, well, that payment's a little higher than I expected.
Right.
And then you can recalibrate your expectations or whatever, but you know exactly where you stand. And I think part of the point is
of a property.
It'll help you understand exactly where you need to be as far as what your budget is and what you qualify for. But there's no minimum amount of time. Like there's no timeline where you have to go buy a house after you get that info.
No.
But you absolutely should get that info as soon as you decide that you want to be a home buyer, so you know where you stand. And then if it ends up being 1 month, sometimes people go find a house the next day. Some people find a house another month. Sometimes it's 6 months.
A year.
Sometimes it's 2 years. Sometimes it's never at all. You know, but that's going to give you the info that you absolutely have to have. Like no home buyer should ever try to avoid getting that info.
I mean, oftentimes I will tell my clients, like, let's at least find out where we are, right? You have to know your baseline so that you can build. Whether it's still living with family or, you know, upsizing to a bigger home, whatever the goal is, if you don't know where you're starting, you can't devise a plan to where you're going. So talking with a great professional will give them a full picture of where they need to be and what the action steps are to take them to where they want to go. So thank you for that information. That was really, really helpful. I'm sure that takes the edge off of anyone that's been anxietable about contacting a lender or afraid of what, you know, they're going to need to tell you or how the whole process is going to work. Let's go back to where you mentioned about having to upload documents or certain things, like so that a potential buyer could come to you with feeling fully confident and prepared. What are the documents that you'll generally want to have in that initial review?
Sure. So it really depends. And so I can kind of give you quickly, you know, multiple scenarios, but it's funny, like sometimes people will text me and say, hey, Nichole, give me your number. What documents do you need from me? And I'm like, well, it really just depends. That's why, that's one of the biggest reasons is that 5-minute conversation initially will help me. Then I know exactly what documents I need, right? So most commonly, someone's going to be employed with a W-2, meaning like they're an employee at a company, you know. So if that were the case for their income, we would need their most recent pay stubs for the last 30 days. So if you get paid twice, you know, every 2 weeks, we need 2 most recent pay stubs. If you get paid every week, we need 4. And then we would need their 20. In this case, we're in 2025, almost 26 now. But so we would need their 2024 and 2023 W-2 forms, which is the tax form that your employer gives you, confirming how much you made that year. That's different than your tax return. So your tax return is the form that you complete with like a tax preparer or TurboTax or something that like basically reports all your income to the IRS. So a lot of times people get that confused. They'll ask for W-2s and they send their tax returns.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, if they're staying on topic of income documents, because we need like income and asset documents typically. So for income documents, if you're not a W-2 employee, sometimes you get a 1099, which is kind of similar, but you're basically an independent contractor. Like your taxes are not taken out. You're basically self-employed. If that's the case, we can't just use your last 30 days worth of pay and your 23 and 24 1099s. We need your actual tax returns, those forms that report how much you earned to the IRS, showing to the IRS. So typically, if you're a 1099, if you receive 1099, you will fill out what's called a Schedule C. You don't need to know this stuff really, but those Schedule Cs will report that 1099 income, and we have to account for expenses and all that.
Right.
And so the last 2 years of those is what we would need.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing if you're if you own a business. Sometimes it'll be on your personal tax returns, or sometimes maybe if you formed like what's called an S corporation, or certain scenarios you'll have business tax returns.
Right.
In which case we need your personal and your business tax returns for the last 2 years. If you earn retirement income, Social Security, pensions, those are very common, VA disability, we really just we don't need any proof of the last 2 years and those type of income. We just need what's typically called an income award letter. So it's very standard with Social Security, it's very standard with VA. Like if you don't have one, you can usually call those entities and just say, hey, I need an award letter emailed or faxed me, and they're going to know exactly what you're asking for, and they send it right over.
Okay, I'm going to ask it. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
What about crypto?
Crypto.
How do you verify that as an income or an asset?
To be honest, I've never. So, I don't know. So there are certain scenarios where you can use crypto as your assets, but I would assume I've honestly been doing loans 13, going on 14 years. I've never.
Really? I'm getting it, and I have no idea.
I've never established a scenario where I had to verify like income from crypto, but I'm pretty sure we would just need your last 2 years tax returns. You would have to show what you're earning. I think you would. I imagine you'd have to withdraw the funds out of your
I've only
account.
heard a few scenarios, but
it would be
like they have to convert it to dollars somehow.
We couldn't. It would be like you can't really use that as income. You could use it as assets. And I could be wrong on this, maybe because some of the niche programs where you could use crypto, but it would be like if you had an investment account,
right,
with Fidelity or something, just a regular investment account, and you earn money over the last 2 years. We can use that if you show proof of like your dividends that you got or whatever.
Gotcha.
But for crypto, I don't think you could do that. You could use it for verifiable funds. They have to be converted to regular dollars. But
so you'd need like a statement, some sort of statement showing that it could be converted. Good to know.
Then we would put together a plan on how you can use those funds, because that's not like across the board thing. Like certain loans are gonna, I think usually niche products are gonna allow you to use crypto.
Okay.
I've actually never come across someone that wanted to use crypto for down. So, but we come across new things every day. And a good lender just knows. In a scenario where I don't know something, I just jot down what you want to do, and we review the guidelines and underwriting, and we get you an answer. So
absolutely, good to know. Okay, so sorry to interrupt. Going back to you went through W-2s, you went through 1099, you went through corporations and business owners, business tax returns, all that. Verifying income. What about, do you need like bank statements from people? Like how do you verify their assets or what they have as far as reserves?
Yeah, so especially, through the loan guidelines and also like federal anti-money laundering laws and all that, we're required to verify where all your funds are coming from in connection with your closing to cover your down payment and any closing costs. So we typically need your 2 most recent statements, monthly statements for your accounts that you're using. So let's focus on like down payment. Let's say the program that you're using requires 5% down. We would have to verify where those funds coming from. So I would probably verify that on that initial phone call, and you say, oh, they're on my checking account, which would be the most simple answer, right? The most simple scenario. So I would get the 2 most recent checking account statements for that account where they're coming from. And then what we really need to see is if they were recently deposited in the last 2 months, like if there's no large deposits that built that balance up within the last 2 monthly statements, then they're basically what's called seasoned. They're good to go.
Yep.
But like, let's say you had let's say you were using $20,000 towards your down, and you just had a $10,000 deposit a month and a half ago, and it showed up within those 2 most recent statements. Then we have to verify where that deposit came from, and it might be, that was a bonus check that my employer gave me, and we get a copy of the check or proof of direct deposit, whatever.
Right.
Employer usually deposits, we don't have to verify, but like, or maybe it was like an insurance settlement, or there's endless reasons why you would get. But like, if you had cash, if you deposited cash in your account, those are the main reasons where it can become an issue.
Gambling winnings.
Yeah. And then we often have to verify, well, not often, but in some scenarios, we have to verify what are called reserves, payment reserves. So sometimes we need to see, per the loan guidelines, you're going to have enough funds in your bank account after you cover your down payment and closing costs. After you close on the home, we want to see that you have enough funds in that account to sometimes pay like 3 to 6 months worth of your payment in case you lost your job, stuff like that.
Sure.
So, and that can come from checking, savings. Sometimes people are using funds from their 401k for their down payment, which is typically allowed. So we get the most recent 401k statements. Sometimes people have like an investment account where the funds are coming from. Sometimes people's down payment are coming from a gift from a family member,
right.
meaning that your parents maybe are giving you money to put towards your down payment. So in that case, sometimes we just need a gift letter and proof of the account where it's coming from. So
Gotcha.
Each scenario is a little bit different, but generally speaking, we need the 2 most recent bank statements.
So you don't need every single one of my bank accounts, only the ones that I am telling you I'm going to bring any closing costs or down payment funds from.
Generally speaking, 90% of the time, especially if you're buying like an investment, meaning that your parent property, that's when we need like those reserves and all that a little bit more. But like, let's say you're buying a primary residence, which most people that would see this are, you're typically just going to need to show proof of the funds that you're spending to purchase the home. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So yeah, and like so sometimes, people will want to provide, they're like, well, I have this account, this account, this account. Like, you can provide it if you want, but really we just need to show proof that you have the money needed for closing.
Well, that's a relief.
Generally speaking.
I think that stresses people out of like, oh, I don't even know where that account is. And
Now, one thing on that, again, we have to verify sources of deposit. So sometimes people will be transferring, like I do it myself. Like,
I do too.
I'm transferring this money to this account because I spend this money on this, and I'm transferring this money to this account. And like sometimes we get entangled into a web of transfers, and I've seen it to where it's like I've seen some scenarios where I just thought it was never ever going to end, and to try to educate the client on that. But so the less you can show of like moving money around from one account to the other, the easier it is.
That's good advice.
And do what you have to do, but maybe talk to the lender about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're preparing to get qualified, stop moving money around.
Yeah.
Good pro tip. Awesome. Okay, so you have done your initial underwriting. You've given the results of that underwriting, and now they're really excited. They've been approved. They have a good amount in mind. They know what their closing costs are going to be. They know approximately what their down payment would be at a certain price point, and they're really excited, happy, and comfortable with all these numbers and ready to start the process. Then what happens?
So let's say like they were working with you, you had referred that client over to me. Mm-hmm. I would typically say, hey, okay, great. Do you understand all these numbers? Yes. Okay. Is it okay if we also share this info with Nichole? Not your social security number or anything like that, but just the details of your pre-approval. Is it okay that I share all that info with her so she's in the loop? They pretty much would say yes. And then so we make sure you're on the same page with everything. And then from there, you don't really need to do, assuming that I did the pre-approval right and extensively, which can be done very quickly, but assuming that, then I don't really need to do much with you at that point. Temporarily, you come back to me later, which we'll get into. But from there, I would just basically turn you over to Nichole or your real estate agent, and then she would help you conduct your home search, determine the right home. And I don't know what goes on with you over there.
Let me fill in the blank. Yeah. So when I get that green light, I am just as excited as the client. It's always such a relief to know that they have really worked through those numbers and have that confidence and feel good about this decision. That really is always the most important thing to me. I don't want them, if I get a client that comes back to me from a lender and they're asking me what the down payment's going to be, we have a problem. Like we're reverse engineering and going backwards a step because
which happens.
It happens all the time. And so for anyone listening or viewing this, when you are finished with your initial consultations with a lender, first of all, the realtors, that's not my lane. That's whole separate licensing. So I'm always going to refer you back to somebody who knows. I had a question today from somebody about rate buy downs. And I said, literally the pricing changes 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. I don't know. Like that's a question for the lender. So when you are finished, when the customer comes back to me, they should not be asking questions about down payments, interest rates, monthly payments, buy down rates, anything like that, because a great lender has gone through all of that. My process at that point is to congratulate the customer on going through the process and digging up their statements and doing all the things that were asked of them, which is not super painful, but, does take a little bit of effort. And then I'm going to reconfirm criteria because sometimes they were looking at X price range and now we're at Y. And that can be a greater or lesser number, but, now they're locked in on where their payment is and they're excited. So we're going to reconfirm all those details, location, number of bedrooms, bath, price point. pool, no pool, all the things that they had on their must-have versus kind of wanted to have. Would have been cool if we did. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a updated search out to them. I'm going to request a copy of that loan approval letter. If the lender has not sent it to me yet, I'm going to make sure I have that in my file because some properties will require proof of cash funds or a loan approval letter to set appointments to see them. So once that is all done, I'll get that list of available properties over to the customer, and we'll go ahead and get an appointment set up to go start shopping for homes. And that's the fun part.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and how would you find that list of properties that they, for them?
That's a great question. So part of the buyer services that we do provide at eXp Realty and my team is, of course, we have access to the MLS. I mean, anybody who has the internet has access to syndicated MLS listings. But we also have access to foreclosure lists, for sale by owner lists, expired and withdrawn listing lists. So we have off-market properties as well that often provide opportunities for our buyers that are beyond what they can see online.
So like that in those scenarios, the MLS is the most common. It's going to have the vast majority of homes that would be for sale, but you also dig through to see if there are any other homes that might be overlooked by some other agents and buyers that, could be a potential.
Absolutely. Yeah. For example, I have a customer that'll come along every couple of months. It's always a customer with a similar wish, and they want to be in this neighborhood or this school district or this zip code. And I have almost 10 years worth of data of expired, withdrawn, for sale by owner properties that are off market, that some sold, some didn't. And I can easily navigate through that as my own personal database of off market listings to search a zip code or a city or a neighborhood and call those homeowners and find out, are you still interested? If I had a buyer that was willing to pay the price you wanted, would you be able to and willing to move in 30 to 60 days? And we've put deals together like that. Yeah.
Okay. And then so once I've been pre-approved with the lender and I get sent over to you and I give you all my criteria, how many bedrooms, bathrooms, zip code, school district, all that.
Yep.
How do I narrow down the ones that I might be most interested in?
Oh, that's a really good question. I get this a lot, mostly from people coming in from out of town. So a good real estate professional is so the customer, I always like them, especially when I'm first working with them, to go through the list because they know what they like, right? And as far as style and color schemes and preferences, the customers that are coming in from out of town, if they don't know the neighborhoods as much, the first thing I always suggest is if you have time, drive the neighborhoods. Because again, they're coming in from a different part of the country or a different state or whatever that situation is. I don't know what those neighborhoods look like. Our neighborhoods here look very different. There are a lot of browns and stucco and tan, and sometimes that can be a bit of a culture shock from people coming in, or they think they wanted a gated community, and then they realize they can follow anybody through the gate, and they really didn't need that on their must-have list. So if you're coming into town and you're coming a day early and you've got your list hashed out of properties, I always suggest just doing a few drive-bys and checking out the neighborhoods. That will whittle down the list and save us time. Getting back to the original question, I generally won't show more than 5 or 6 properties at the most in a day, ideally 3 to 5. And the reason is most customers will not remember the first one from the last one. And it's not because they're not capable or incompetent. It's a lot. It's overwhelming, and they start to look all the same, and they just don't. They're like, was that the one with the pool? Or no, that was the one in the gated community. And it's a lot. It's a big decision. So their mind is churning on a lot of data and information. So your first appointment will pick 3 to 5 of the best properties. If they send me a list of 10, I may ask additional questions to try to whittle down that list. Or I may say, hey, you said you didn't want solar, right? Did you realize that this property has solar? And
smart.
And I'll kind of go through it and whittle it down myself to the best ones. And you said you really preferred 5 bedrooms. Let's just today stick with the ones that have 5 bedrooms and go from there. So after the first visit, I'm then going to get a feel for them, right? I'm going to get a feel for what she likes, what he likes, because it's not always the same. He's interested in the garage, she's interested in the kitchen, or sometimes it's vice versa. But once I have that initial consult done,
keep going, sorry.
Once we have that initial consult done and I've had that first showing, if we don't find the house on the first showing, which oftentimes does happen, if it happens, don't freak out. It means that together, collaboratively, we've done a great job in really vetting those properties and listening to what you want. If for some reason it doesn't happen and we're tweaking that criteria a little bit, sometimes we have to increase the price point to get all the must-haves in there. Sometimes we have to spread out the geographical location a little bit. Then we keep tweaking that until we're finding the properties that you really love and we get the right one.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Now, let's say I narrowed down 3 to 5 that I want to go look at. Mm-hmm. Where did I look at that? On what kind of list was it? It was like an email or it's like online where you can send those to me where it's online?
I use 2 different portals, one through my CRM and one through the Las Vegas Realtors, in which I can send properties. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we have AI technology and all the things now. But, I mean, I'm old school. I find that just asking a lot of questions and listening, because sometimes I'll have a customer that comes to me and says, I want A, B, and C. And then they send me a list of properties that are X, Z, and Y.
Yeah.
And so we have to pause and say, hey, what happened to A, B, and C? Like, what changed? Because they're constantly consuming data and online, and like things start to veer, but they forget to tell me. So we go back and then they say, well, I talked to my friend and they live in Y neighborhood, and that's why I want to be in Y neighborhood now, and I've abandoned A neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, great. Let me stay together with you in alignment in our searches, so we're looking at the right product together. And so keeping those lines of communication open and just exploring all possibilities till we get to the right one, it is a journey.
So one thing I didn't realize as a lender, it's very possible for a home buyer to kind of get out of sync with their goals on their home search. Yeah. So part of your job is to help them be in sync with their goals and how those homes that they're interested in meet their goals.
Yeah, I will. Buyers, it's no secret, are taking longer to make decisions, which is okay. With interest rates the way they've been and the market, like they've been really particular. And so I had a buyer this summer where they kept telling me, they kept picking properties that had lots that were too small. We'd go see it. The feedback was always lots too small. And the lot wasn't too small. It was a fine size lot. It's too small for them. And so at some point, as their agent and representing their best interest, we had to start saying, hey, this lot is 4,700 square feet. Everything you've looked at under 6,000 square feet, you don't like. So
just a reminder,
tell me why do we want to go see this property? And they'll go, you know what, you're right. And they start to realize that there's a pattern, because the pictures look beautiful online.
Yeah, it's just fun to look at houses too, right?
It totally is. Yeah. But like it gets them frustrated, right? Because sometimes a customer will think the more houses, they start to doubt our skills as a real estate agent, and we don't want that. Like, we definitely, if you're a good agent and you're listening and you're having that communication constantly, it's okay to interrupt that and say, I would love to see you guys on my Saturday.
Right. But
do we need to look at another property that's under a 6,000 square foot lot when every single one you've passed on, and they see the inside and think it's beautiful, and it's not that we won't show it to them. It's just that they get into a pattern. They like what they like. You like living where you live. I like living where I live. And for me, it's the end of a cul-de-sac.
Yeah, and it's not. It's definitely not about you, even though it could seem like, oh, she doesn't want to show me this house. But it is about them, because you're remembering their goals and you've done this a long time.
Yes.
And it's like you might think, well, why not? Let's go look at that house. But if you know it's not going to be one that you consider, you should just focus on the ones that you know
they do get frustrated, whether they outwardly realize it or not. Like, they start to feel defeated. Like, we're never going to find the one.
So let's definitely not look at the ones that we know are not the one. Yeah.
Right. And because you're like, oh, I love everything about this house, but the lot's too small.
Sure. Okay.
It's like, dangling the delicious cake right in front of you, but I'm like, you're allergic to nuts, so you can't have it.
Sure. Okay. So let's say I found the home that I love. How do I know what I should pay for it?
Good question. Well, the customer has done the homework with a great lender like yourself. So you know what you can qualify for and pay for. And then it just comes down to strategy, right? Right now, things are leaning towards the favor of the buyer. So we're going to look at what their strategy was. If it was to have as low of a down payment as possible, there are options right now where we can negotiate maybe not a lower price per se, but closing costs to help them buy down the rate and get a lower long-term interest rate payment, or a 2-1 buy down, or whatever that strategy they've come up with. And there are some options where we can get a little bit of a lower price and a little bit of closing costs. You know, where the best deals I'm finding right now in incentives are new construction, and we do keep an updated list of where those great deals are. So there's a lot of different options. And many of the new construction homes are on the MLS now.
Sure.
Because they have some standing inventory. So there's a lot of different options on how to structure the deal, and a lot of that's going to come from your department and figuring out how to optimize their strategy.
Yeah, and just to kind of chime in on that, I think what you're saying is right now in this market, you don't always have to pay the full price. So you could either ask for a little bit lower price on the home, or you could instead pay maybe the full price or close to it and ask for them to provide what's called a seller credit, which gets applied towards the buyer's closing costs. And then that credit can either be used to basically wipe out or almost close to wipe out the buyer's closing costs. So they're really only coming out of pocket with down payment. They don't have that additional closing cost that we broke down earlier or mentioned earlier.
Right.
Or they could still pay the closing costs they were expected to pay, but then use that credit to do what's called a buy down, where basically you pay an upfront fee, in this case using the seller's funds, to get a lower rate than you otherwise would have got if you didn't pay those upfront funds, which translates to a lower payment, right?
Nailed it.
Yeah, but sometimes you can have both, sometimes you cannot. So sometimes people are just, they got to really make sure they're within their budget. Sometimes people want to make sure they spend as little as possible and get their payment as low as possible. But there's a balancing act. You have to figure out sometimes what you want more. Do you want to lower your payment more, or do you want to make sure you part with less money out of your savings account?
Right. And those are the conversations I'm going to have. When we've identified the one, we don't want to lose it. And we don't want the sellers to be angry and shut down. So we've got to come in with some reasonable numbers that make sense. My job with the other agent, if there is one, is to create a win-win situation. Their sellers want to sell, my buyers want to buy. Everybody doesn't want to feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. So how do we bring them together to meet in the middle so that everybody's happy? It's not an adversarial conversation. It's a collaboration.
One thing I think that sometimes us in this line of work can be a little insensitive on is people want to get a good deal.
Yeah.
And they see these bargain shows or whatever. And so sometimes people offer what we would have considered way too of a lowball offer. But then I also have to step back and be like, who am I to say it's too low? But at a certain point, reality comes in, and there is an offer on any given home that's just too low. So if there was an offer that's just way too low from a client that they want to offer, they say, Nichole, I really want to offer this amount. What is your advice to them in that scenario?
My advice to someone that a home buyer that wants to make a low, what might be considered ridiculous offer, would be to remind them this is not 2006. Okay, it's definitely a softer market than we've seen the last 5 years. But not all sellers are desperate. The sky is not falling for everyone. And by tossing offers out or, being adversarial in these conversations with other agents or whatever, is leaving a bad taste in seller. I work with a lot of sellers and buyers. But, on the seller side, I have sellers that have pulled homes off the market.
They're stressed.
Yeah. They just don't need to sell. And by sending offers like that, you're actually damaging the inventory as a whole, because they'll get discouraged and pull what would have been a great home. It just happened 2 weeks ago. We pulled a house off the market. The seller went a different direction. He owns multiple properties. And the agent that was huffing and puffing and stomping his feet with a lot of ego texted me and was like, what happened? Why'd they pull it off the market? And I said, he's not selling anymore. And his buyers loved the house, and they, created a problem for themselves because there were no homes remodeled and nice like that one. So keep in mind, as a buyer coming to this marketplace, that everyone doesn't need to put up with it.
Yeah, right.
So when I'm consulting a buyer, I'll say, look, what is your bottom line? Like, what is the most you would be willing to pay? And a lot of times they'll say to me, I'd pay the asking price. Okay, great. Like, then let's
go a little lower.
Yeah, let's not be silly. Like, obviously everybody wants to play the game. And I'm happy to come in lower and let's figure out like all the strategies we just discussed. Do you want to keep more money in your pocket? Do you want to have a lower rate? And let's come up with a starting point that you can live with. And you know what? If they take it, wham, bam, awesome. Like, let's do it. You got a great deal. But they're likely not going to come back at exactly what they're asking for. They're going to meet us somewhere.
In the middle, yeah.
Right? And so when you come out swinging with like something ridiculous and crazy, they may not come back with anything. And I get that often too with when I'm on the listing side. I've had sellers been so offended that they don't even want to respond. And then the agent gets upset with me and they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, there's no like statute that says someone needs to respond to a silly offer. They can tell you to pound sand.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just some things being learned by, newer agents that haven't been doing this as long and been through different up and down markets, that the tide will shift again. And what's the saying? That then we'll see who's not wearing pants, right? So, yeah, that's my advice, is to be reasonable. Definitely try to get a good deal, but don't go in so crazy that they shut down and then you've lost a house that it was the one, right? You've just spent weeks, months looking at houses and that was the one, and you came in with a dumb offer and now they're out. They don't even want to talk to you.
Sure. Let's say a client is super stoked about figuring out that they qualify for a home.
Yeah.
And you go take them out to see houses on the first day, and there's a home that's been on the market for 90 days and they just love it and they're like, offer whatever you need. I want this house. How would you go about figuring out what to offer on something like that?
For sure. I had this Friday, I showed a couple of homes for over $1 million over near Chinatown. And so they were customs. So, but these are fully remodeled. They're all over the place. So the first thing that we're going to sit down and do is pull what we call comps or comparable sales. Just as though if you were selling your home, I would pull comparable sales to see where to price it to sell. We have the same process engineered for buyers. That we're going to pull up, whether it's the subdivision or a 2-mile radius of similar homes. We're going to pick homes. In this case, for this specific example, they were all single stories with no HOA, with pools in a certain size lot. So I hone that criteria in to make sure that we're seeing the absolute best homes. And then I'm going to show them, like, here is what recently sold in the last 180 or 90 days. Here are the ones that are under contract, which is going to give us a vision of what the buyers have done in the last 30 to 45 days. And then here's all the inventory you have to pick from. Some are better than this home. Many are worse. And, we can go anywhere in between this range. Where do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, because I could see myself being that way. Like, I just want this house. Like,
yeah.
I've looked at very few homes in the homes that I've purchased. Like, I ended up just picking one pretty quickly, and I'm like, maybe I should have been like slowed down a little bit.
It depends on market conditions. We're always advocating to get our buyers the best deal, 100%. Like, I'm never going to not write the offer, but I will caution them, like, this could, not go anywhere fast, and you didn't like any other homes. So, but we want to use data and metrics to come in. For me as a buyer's agent, and I wish all buyer's agents did this, please, sending the message out to the universe. Like, if you are sending in a lower offer, if I'm sending in a lower offer for a customer, I'm going to provide those comparable sales and those metrics and data that I just researched and say, hey, please share this with the seller. I know this is, not the price that they were hoping for, but based on this data here and the other homes that have sold in the area, which maybe they haven't looked at in a minute, I'm sending this to make your job easier, Mr. Listing Agent, so that you can share with them how the buyers are coming up with the price that they're coming up with. And I think that always makes for a smoother conversation between the agents and between the listing agent and their seller, so they're not mad at the messenger, right?
Okay. So, once someone goes under contract to buy a house, they determine a price, and the seller accepts their offer, what can they expect next?
Oh, that's like celebration time. We're having a great time. So we have a lot of automated systems on my team that keep everybody up to date on a weekly basis, but that's where the real fun begins. We are going to call you and say, Ryan, great news. The Smiths have found their dream property. We're going into contract. My team will send a copy of the contract over to you, to the escrow company, to the home inspector. You're going to be working on your processes, which we can go into in a minute. But basically, my team is quarterbacking the entire transaction with all the other vendors and inspectors and whatever else that we're working on in that particular transaction. So yeah, we're celebrating. We are reassuring the customer that we've got this and this is going to be as smooth a closing as we can possibly make it, and keeping them updated on milestones and timelines throughout the process.
Sure. Okay. And typically when you go under contract, how long does it take until you become the owner?
That's a great question. It can vary. When it's cash, it could be as little as 10 days or 15 days. If it's a loan, it's usually between 30 to 60 days, depending on the type of loan and different metrics involved. But yeah, not usually longer than 60 days unless the parties arranged for that on purpose because they needed more time for some reason.
And usually under 30 in here in Nevada, at least in the current market for the last several years.
I've seen you do it in like 12 days.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's a good transition because if you just got some basic info from a lender, or maybe didn't even talk to a lender yet, and somehow went under contract to buy a home, which happens, and let's say like it was a scenario where the seller's like, I need to be out of here. I'll accept your offer at that price, but only if you can close in 21 days.
Yeah.
Which is not uncommon. Sometimes even less. If you didn't go through all the steps correctly through the pre-approval process, you're already running behind.
Yes.
To where if you did all that right, first off, you totally are informed on what you can expect your home loan to look like and all that. But then really from there, the lender often, so that's when you turn them back over to the lender, the buyer, and then we continue the actual loan process because that was a pre-approval. Now we need to complete your file for that purchase. And then we submit it to what's called an underwriter. They're technically the one that's supposed to approve the loan. That's their job, but really, if you're dealing with a loan officer that knows how to do their job, technically, well, really, what the underwriter is doing is just signing off that the lender put the file together correctly. Right.
And at this point, you're able to fill in the blanks that you didn't have before. You mentioned, taxes, insurance, HOAs, SIDS and LIDs, like whatever the blanks are. In that file with that specific property. Now I give you the contract and you're able to fill in all those blanks and give them a solid okay, here's where your payment's going to be based on the price you've negotiated because you have an approved price and then you have the actual contract price.
Yeah. So you might have been pre-approved to get a home loan up to $450,000, but maybe the home that you found, you'll need a $400,000 loan.
Right.
So we would put all the numbers together for that specific address. We put together what's called a loan disclosure package, which goes over all the numbers on there. We'd still probably have an estimate so you have to have homeowner's insurance. You get to pick the insurance company. So we'd have an estimate on there, but we can plug in what the exact monthly property taxes are that are included in your payment, the HOA, which is not included in your payment, but you would know what the monthly expense is for that. We put together all the detailed closing costs, any lender fees, title and escrow fees, appraisal fee, all we bulked it in this whole conversation all together, but that's when we would break it all down for you. I gave an estimate of what you would expect. Usually it's going to be close to that. And I would send another explanation out going over all that with you. You would sign your disclosures, and then we would order what's called an appraisal. Yeah. So what that means is the lender needs to know that home is worth what you're paying for it. So we order an appraisal. It's part of the closing costs. And then usually the appraisal will come back confirming yes, this home is valued at least what you're purchasing it for. If it's not, then you have some time within your contract period to either renegotiate or cancel out. We have all that packaged up. We usually get new pay stubs, maybe new bank statements. At that point, hopefully we only need a couple of basic updated things so we can quickly get it off to that underwriter and get it approved through them. And then from there, we take a few steps to get it to closing. But the most important thing once you go under contract is the lender doesn't just sit around because they can technically they could sit around for a few days and no one would really know. Maybe they'd start asking hey, did you get this done? But
my team would know.
Yeah. Yeah, but some don't,
Yeah.
So but the important thing as a lender lender is to move forward with those initial steps as quickly as possible, because those closing dates can really sneak up on you. And so you just always want to make sure you're ahead of the game. Anything that updated that the lender is going to need from you and all that, you get them, so that you can make sure you get to that closing date on time.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we skipped over that's really important, and I'm asking this question to both of us, but I'm going to ask you first, is what can a home buyer expect as far as upfront costs when they finally identify that home that they're buying?
So it's hard. Like, so a lot of people want like a percentage of, like, so some people, the way they'll estimate what your closing cost. So let's say you're a first time home buyer and you can put as little as 3% down, right? So if you're buying a $300,000 house, that would be a $9,000 down payment.
Right.
So that's just your down. That's basically you're buying part of that house, like, and you're getting a loan for $291,000. But then you would also have closing costs, like the fees that are associated with you buying that home. So a lot of people will want like a percentage. But if you buy like a $200,000 home, that percentage is going to be different than you buy a $1 million home, because the fees, just the way they add up. So like, I would say it's just tough to say because it depends on what state you're in. Obviously, we're here in Nevada.
Right.
But, I would say a good rule of thumb here in Nevada, if you're like buying a primary residence, let's say in the $400,000 range, you could expect the closing cost to maybe be about 3% of the price of the home. And sometimes it ends up being a little bit less. And so what really can change that is if you decide you want to pay those discount points, which are those upfront loan fees that you pay in order to get a lower rate and a lower payment. So if you're paying a lot of discount points, then the closing cost could be higher. But I usually will tell my buyers, in most scenarios, sometimes I'll adjust it based on the price of the home, but in that range or somewhere around that range, I would expect maybe, given the expectation, it's probably going to be 3% of the price. And so you might have made an offer on that home. Hey, we'll offer you $300,000. When you write up the offer, you said, okay, we'll offer you $300,000 for the home, but we want a $9,000 credit towards my buyer's closing costs.
Right.
So in that case, it would basically potentially wipe out all the closing costs. So then you would only come out of pocket with $9,000 for the 3% down. We're kind of 3% down payment and an estimated 3% for closing costs. Now, if the seller said, no, we won't give you any credit, and you still love the home, and you want that home and you don't want the deal to blow up over that, then you would expect to pay your down payment, which is in that example 3% down, and then expect to pay another $9,000 for closing costs.
Yep, that makes sense. Now, what about the cost of the appraisal? Is that paid up front or at the end of the closing?
So when you go under contract to buy a house, there's several. You're going to have to come out of pocket with several things. Most of everything, your down payment and closing costs are due at closing, but so basically 3 things. So the first thing you would pay that you're more familiar with is the earnest money deposit. Yeah. Basically, when you go under contract to buy a home, it's basically like, hey, look, we at least have some money in our bank, and here's proof, right? It's basically what it is. So, like, if I'm offering $300,000 a home, if you accept our offer, we'll put $3,000 in earnest money deposit.
Yeah. The way I explain it is it's a good faith deposit.
Yeah.
Right? It's the buyer is saying, we want to buy your home, and we're acting in good faith that we're going to perform on this contract. Will you take your home off the market for the next 30 days so that we can do our processes and evaluate and have an appraisal and have our lender go through their process? And in exchange for your time off the market, this is the deposit we are in good faith offering. Meaning if that buyer does not perform on the contract, that could be a surrender of that deposit in exchange for the time that it was off the market. So
yeah, do you just drop off like an envelope of cash to the seller
every day?
House,
no, I'm kidding.
How does that work? The deposit.
Nowadays the deposit has to be wired. Generally, because of different wire fraud and things that have gone on. They don't usually like checks because it takes a long time for checks to clear. If it's a longer closing period, they will often, they might take a check, but it depends on the closing company. So within, let's say the contract is accepted today and we're sending out congratulations, depending how the contract was written, usually that earnest money deposit is going to be due anywhere between 1 to 3 business days after acceptance. So if it's accepted on a Saturday, it might be due Tuesday or Wednesday. And it's wired in. And the amount in Las Vegas, this can change depending on markets, but here it's usually about 1% So if it's a $500,000 house, I would expect somewhere between like $5,000 and $10,000 minimum. And of course, that earnest money deposit does go towards your down payment and or closing costs that you just discussed.
And the seller has no access to those funds initially. It gets deposited in through escrow, which is like a third-party service, which basically holds the funds there.
They're a neutral third party. The funds are held there. If for some reason in the first 10 days you do your inspection, if that's your inspection period, or the title work comes back and you find out that there's a lien, or something happens in those first 10 days that you don't like, or you find out there was an HOA and it wasn't disclosed in the listing, whatever it is, you generally have about a 10-day period where you can pretty much cancel for any reason and you would get that money back.
Yeah, and so so that kind of goes along with some of the other stuff here. So the other upfront fee that you would pay is typically an inspection. That's optional.
Not optional.
Yeah, if you're,
we highly recommend.
Just get one, but it is optional. But basically, that covers that a professional inspector goes in, makes sure that the home is nothing like seriously wrong or damaged with the home.
And there's a variety of inspections. So we have what's called a general home inspection, which it varies the price depending on the size of the home. But for an average size home, 3,000 square feet or less, you're probably looking at $500-$600 on the highest end. And there's different add-ons, like they can do video inspections. If you're out of town, they can do different things that could drive it up a little bit more, moisture meters, all kinds of different things. But I want to touch on this here because if you're buying custom homes or certain types of properties, there's other inspections like well inspections, septic inspections. Older homes, we sometimes see like the drain and sewer inspections because of the pipes shifting under older properties. We now have solar inspectors. There's all different types of inspections that can be done, but at a minimum, yes, it's optional, but we highly recommend you at least get the general home inspection. And then, of course, on VA loans, a termite inspection is required nationally.
So, if you just needed the general home inspection, let's say you're buying a $400,000 house, roughly how much is that?
I would say about $500, some give or take, might be $4, might be $6.
And if you get that inspection done, you found something seriously wrong with the home, you're out the $500, you get your earnest money deposit back. As long as you're making sure you do it within those required time periods in your contract.
Correct.
You're out the $500, you get your earnest money deposit back, and you move on.
Yeah, but you're not buying a lemon.
Yes.
And I have an example this summer of a homeowner that purchased a home without an inspection, and literally the week after we closed, and we got a home warranty, but the AC went out, and it cost them like thousands. Yeah, and it looked like it was in good shape, but I'm not an inspector, and nor are they. But inside of it, there was something off, and the home warranty covered a little bit of it, but it was pretty clear that it was not installed properly or something, which is the type of thing that an inspector is usually going to pick up on.
Yeah. Okay. So when you go under contract, upfront things that you pay, earnest money, which is just a deposit, it's not a fee.
Right.
An inspection fee, about $500 or so, depending on the home price. And then you have to have an appraisal done in the beginning stages. So like I said, the lender wants to make sure that the home, and you want to make sure as a buyer, you want to make sure that the home you're actually not overpaying for the home. Because, of course, it doesn't happen often because real estate agents, good agents, are going to be good at pricing out the homes. And it all comes down to comparable sales in the neighborhood. And that's what the appraised value is based on. What did other similar homes sell for recently? Right. It's the easiest way to sum it up. So the appraisal has to be paid up front because the appraiser is just like the lender is required to order it through a standard appraisal management company. But it is just an independent appraiser going out to the home. I don't know if the right word's independent, but it's an appraiser that's doing a service that needs.
You're right. It's an independent third party, and it's a good system of checks and balances. Yeah. When the market was going haywire several years ago, and I had buyers being like, we had to overbid to get properties, and they would be concerned, like, are we paying too much? And I said, there's going to be a system of checks and balances through your lender to know that if we're paying too much, there's going to be a problem with it in appraising. And some people still opted to pay over appraised value, and that was their choice because at the end of the day, the true value of the property is what the buyer's willing to pay and where the seller's willing to sell. But it is a good system of checks and balances. I just had another one come back with that came in $50,000 under at a lender. Or not a lender, a builder. So ask me how happy those customers are. Yeah. They just waited 6 months for it to be built and saved $50,000.
Yeah. And so you want to know as a buyer that the home's appraising at what you're buying it. The lender will not lend you more than what the value is worth.
No.
So, like if you're putting in the minimum required down and it gets appraised low, you could either renegotiate the price, which sometimes you get lucky and the seller's like, okay, we'll sell it to you for the appraised value. Sometimes they'll meet in the middle, which in that case you need to come out of pocket with a little bit extra than what you thought. So, if it appraises low and and you can't get the home bought for what the home appraised for. The short answer is a buyer will have to end up coming up with more down in order to still buy that home. Or they could decide, okay, well, we're not going to buy this home and move on. And so all these things are built in. And so in that case, you would have paid, maybe you already got the inspection done, but the inspection was fine. You paid the $500 for that. And then appraisal is about $500. So now you paid $500 for the appraisal, but now it came in low and you can't come to an agreement. Well, you might be cancel out of that contract, and then you are out $1,000, whatever. But it's much better than not knowing if you're overpaying for a home,
right?
And that doesn't happen that often.
No, it's very rare. Mm-hmm. Like I said, with the one even that came in 50,000 under, they worked it out because the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy. So the majority of the time we can work things out, even with repairs. We go to the sellers and their agent and just show them the report and say, these are the things that are important to them. And we find a solution.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we can get close to summing things up here. So you got pre-approved with the lender. They broke down all your exact options. You got turned over to the real estate agent. They helped you stay on track for the right homes that meet your requirements. You negotiated a price. You went under contract. I'm gonna run out of I'm not good at doing fingers, but you go under contract to buy. You put the earnest money deposit down. You get an inspection and appraisal done. All that comes back. You get any other updated documents that you need to the lender, updated pay stubs, updated bank statements, a few other basic things, homeowner's insurance quote to insure the home. The lender submits the file off to the underwriting. At that point, underwriter. Sometimes lenders will say, well, the underwriter's got to approve the loan. They're the one that decide. They are the one that decide, but you should never be putting that stress on the buyer. Like at that point, I'm usually like, hey, the underwriter just got to make sure that I calculated this correctly, which I did. So they're just going to check everything. They'll sign off and approve the loan. Once the loan is approved, then we issue what's called your loan document package. It's a big stack of paperwork, just signing, all the basic stuff in the loan. That's for another video. Yeah. It's not important to get into that, honestly. You would provide any additional funds that you owe for down payment and closing costs. Your earnest money would be subtracted out of that. And then you sign your final documents. Seller signs their final documents. And then you officially close. The sale records with the county, you get your keys. Really, is that kind of a good way to sum it up?
No, it's perfect. And I think the point of this video is we really wanted to tap into the initial fears and anxieties that come in. And really, we've laid out a roadmap of what the expectations should look like. So if you want more of this content, like and follow.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think that's a good way to end it, honestly.
Do it. Do your wink.
Yeah.